I had a real problem at university. Actually, I had several problems at university, not the least of which was getting to class on time. But the problem that I had in particular is that the university I attended required that if you were a major in one of the colleges, in my case, social sciences, you had to, in order to graduate, you had to take a class in one class in each of the other colleges. So you had to take a phys ed class, you had to take a humanity, and all of that was fine until I came to fine arts. What was I going to take for fine arts? I cannot draw to save my life. My stick men don't even stand up properly. My musical ability extends to walking across the room and pushing a button. What was I going to take? And one of my friends at coffee said, well, you're a history major, so why don't you take art history? And I said, okay, I'll bite. What the hell is that? And they said, well, I guess it's the history of art. Well, I thought, okay. So I registered, big hall, larger than this one, 500 students. And of course, in those days, they used slides. And the professor, I'll never forget her, Maya Bismanis, started off with a shot of a Greek Nike and launched into how art is representative of its age, and in fact often leads its age. And if anyone could identify this statue and what it represented, and she said, it's a Nike, but what does it represent? And I, without thinking, just put up my hand and said, the Battle of Salamis. And she stopped and she said, who said that? And I'm shrinking because at that age, you don't want to stand out. Certainly not in a room of 500 others who are groaning. And how did you know that? And I said, I'm a history major. And she said, you're the first person that's ever identified it properly. And I thought, I'm in. I'm going to enjoy this class. I'm going to get a lot out of it, which I did. I aced it. It was so impressive that I ended up signing up for a second class, which I forget the title of it, but it was basically from Jacques-Louis David to Picasso, 19th and 20th century art. I didn't do as well, but I certainly learned a lot. And what it gave me, of course, was an appreciation of the visual arts and how important they are as an expression of a society, of its times, of the interests of the population. And then years later, when I moved to Medicine Hat, I went out for a walk the second or third day that I was here, and I walked across the parking lot and I walked down Second, and I will never forget that visual I had of Second Street heading toward the river. And then several years later, I met Theresa through our Rotary Club. She invited a number of us to her studio, and I saw that same picture on the wall of her studio, just as I remembered it. And I thought, oh, I've got to have that. Never been an art collector much, but fortunately, I think you had a sale. I think you did. And I convinced my wife, Donna, that that would look great in our home, and it does, because we purchased it, and I can say to my friends and family and people I know in Medicine Hat, I have an Eisenbarth in our home. And it is the image that I recall my first impression of Medicine Hat. What I've discovered since is that there are a significant number of what are being called memory painters. And for some reason, the Great Plains from Texas up to Alberta and Saskatchewan has a significant number of them. And these are artists who recall and capture memories on canvas. And they are remarkably and incredibly accurate, to the point where an historian has studied them and is now calling on her fellow historians to use them as historical documents as evidence of what transpired at a particular time and place. And I can say that we have a memory artist here in Medicine Hat, and that she has agreed to join us tonight to talk about growing up in Medicine Hat and her memory paintings. So please join me in welcoming Theresa Eisenbarth, Medicine Hat artist.
I was saying to the staff earlier that when Bruce had phoned me to come do a presentation, I thought, well, yeah, that sounds like a really great idea. And then when I was preparing the slide presentation, I thought, what did I get myself into? I never actually had done a presentation about my art other than at an exhibition or an opening or something like that. So I said, if I stumble a little bit, and I hope you'll be patient with me. So thank you very much for having me here tonight. And thanks for Bruce for inviting me. I'm truly honored to be here. I have painted for about 11 years now, and some of the earlier work that I painted was more reflective of maybe research at the archives with dates and who built the buildings and that sort of thing. But I thought you guys probably know all of that stuff, so you probably don't need me to present and mess up a name or two. So most of mine are just going to be stories of growing up in Medicine Hat and why they're important for me to paint. And I would love for this to be somewhat interactive. If you have any questions, please just put up your hand and we can go back and forth. Or if you have a question from something that I'm talking about, please, I don't mind you asking any questions. And I didn't put in my presentation anything about my painting process, which was kind of, I guess, odd. But if you have any questions in regards to how I paint or how I select my images, all those sorts of things, please feel free to ask that too. So I can't see without my glasses, so I definitely have to put those on. Painting definitely gets challenging now that the distance thing is kind of sliding a little bit. So I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview of myself. So in terms of the presentation tonight, I'm going to cover a little bit about me, some of the exhibitions I've been in, and I'm not covering all the exhibitions, just the major ones I've been in. And then I have a gallery of lots of the work that I'll talk about and some of the stories. And I apologize if some of you came on my walking tours. There's maybe 2 or 3 stories that might be similar, but I don't think I tell them the same every time. Workshops and projects that I'm involved in right now, and then just contact information. If you have any follow-up questions after tonight, I'd sure love to hear from you. So I guess when I was doing a little bit of a biography or an artist statement about myself, I probably should have just contacted Bruce, and he could have sorted everything out for me. Because as an artist, it's really hard to figure out what you're doing sometimes. You kind of go with your gut, you do what you like, you photograph what you like, and then you try and take all those pieces together and make it something that you like in terms of a painting, which is a different type of science in itself. So I kind of came up to, and I know it's very generic, telling stories about our shared environment. And our shared environment, the common that we have, or things in common, is Medicine Hat and surrounding Medicine Hat. So when I first started painting, I actually didn't really know what I wanted to paint. I kind of started off like everybody else starts off, and I painted flowers because it seems like when you're unsure of what you paint, flowers are beautiful, they bring joy to people. So I had started with painting flowers, and I didn't really get into painting things about Medicine Hat until 2nd Street downtown. It was a couple of years later, probably about 3 years into when I was painting. Downtown Medicine Hat on 2nd Street, there was so many buildings for sale and for lease. And it seemed like it was just downtown was being abandoned. And I guess that lit a fire in my soul. And I thought, I'm going to photograph all those buildings that have for sale and for lease signs on them. And then I'm going to find out about them. So that's actually how it transpired to be one of my first exhibitions and how I started painting some of the buildings and my memories of Medicine Hat. So I like to say that I capture the things people walk by daily without really taking time to see them or look at the story behind them. Usually when I'm painting something, I have to say it's my story, but not always. It can be somebody else's story that they tell me about the building or an event that happened there. All those things come into play in the genre of memory painting. So when Bruce also had talked to me too, the day on the phone, I didn't even know memory painting was a genre. So again, if I need to figure out what I'm doing, I just need to call Bruce. So we had a great talk on the phone about that, and he directed me to some other artists in Canada that he knew of and had done research on that actually were doing the same thing. So all those pieces in my head kind of fell together after that. So my work is about visual storytelling. I do lots of different types of work for people. Often people say, well, what do you do all day? There actually is a program in Britain that says, what do artists do all day? But I do lots of commission work. I paint for exhibits. I do many community projects, and I've done a few online things during COVID. So it's kind of a broad reach. And with my memory paintings, I have branched out into a little bit more landscape too. So it all keeps me super busy. I like to say that the things that I capture, they're inspired by the sights, sounds, and aromas of today with kind of a little sprinkling of things from the past. And those would be my storytelling. If you've seen my work before, or if you haven't seen my work before, my focus is on vibrant color. I love color, and I use a lot of non-traditional materials in my paintings. I think when I'm portraying family homes and businesses and the strong neighborhoods that we have in Western Canada, that all things kind of collage together bring a really arresting quality to my work that I don't see anywhere else. So I always want to create a piece of art that feels like a home and that you would want to have in your home, and that it's a talking piece that you can share with others. So I have been painting for 10 plus years. I'm born and raised in Medicine Hat, which I know is kind of a rarity these days. I'm from a very large family, so I will meet somebody at a party and they'll talk to me a little bit about art, and then all of a sudden I'll mention my sister and they'll go, oh, I didn't know you were all related. So, and I'm from a family of 8 kids, so by the time they get married, it becomes quite a large gathering whenever we get together. I took visual studies, which is now called the Art and Design program at the Medicine Hat College back in 1986. And I continued on and I went to University of Calgary and I took my Bachelor of Fine Arts. And after that, I had thought, well, I should have went for my master's, and I didn't. I thought, I'm going to take a couple of years off and I'm going to work. Well, guess what? I never went back to school. So I always ended up working in business. I worked for the credit union for 10 years here in Medicine Hat when they were independent. And then after that, my husband was traveling with work, so I decided to stay at home. But I always did some form of artwork, whether or not be sketching. I did murals, I did batiks. I never actually really painted all that much because my focus at university was printmaking. I did lithography, if you know what that is. The big limestones that are the big stones that you actually print off of, and that was my major. So painting to me, I took one painting class at the Medicine Hat College. That was it. So people ask me, why did I start painting? I went back to the college and got a job there when my kids were teenagers. And I just had this nagging feeling every day. I drove from Southridge over that Trans-Canada Bridge to go to the college. And I thought, what am I doing? This isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. And probably after about 3 or 4 months, they had offered me a full-time job at the college. And sometimes I think I should have taken that, but I thought, no, I'm going to paint. So now it's 11 years and I'm still painting. So I really enjoy what I do, and I hope it shows in my work. So my work is primarily acrylic and mixed media paints. So I say mixed media because in most of my artwork, there are words that are collaged in the paintings. And I'll talk about it a little bit more, but I put door hardware in my paintings as well. And there's a whole story that I'll talk about later on when I get to that slide. And those are things that have just developed over the years. When I first started painting, I thought I have to gravitate towards a word. So I selected a word every year. And most of those paintings have, most of those words or definition of that word have shown up in my artwork. Now when people actually commission a piece or they do a custom piece, they pick their own word if they want to put in the piece. So it's kind of progressed into a very interesting transition. And again, I think it adds a little bit of interest and connection to the artwork for those people. So I am a full-time artist. I grew up in the historic River Flats neighborhood of Medicine Hat. And since then, since I started doing art, I've kind of spent my career capturing the places I remember as a child growing up down there. So. I established my studio in 2013. Recently, I moved my studio home after COVID. I know with COVID, everybody had an impact from that, but I guess for me is I just kind of wanted to be at home, and I had a really large space that I rented down there. So now, when we moved it home in December, I had boxes from floor to ceiling, and I had one little path to go down to my office. So it's taken me months to sort through all of my stuff. My goal is still to teach classes again from my house. And I taught quite a few classes down at the old Nutter studio. So I hope that I'm pretty close to being able to do that. So I'm happy about that. So I do all sorts of lessons for people. I conduct workshops yeah, so it's kind of all a mixed bag of things. Some weeks it's actually hard to get to the painting canvas because I'm doing things like this and I'm doing lots of other things. So some of my exhibitions that I've been in are, I've listed a few here. I've been in lots of group exhibitions, both now online and here in Medicine Hat and outside of Medicine Hat, which is always fun to do. But my first exhibition was the Medelta Ewell Gallery, and that was when I painted those doors and the street scenes of 2nd Street. And that was a really interesting project because that's when the copper penny was being expired. And so all my paintings were on a copper background. Black drawings, like shades of tones of black and gray on a copper background. So all those paintings. So that was kind of my first exhibition and where I started painting some of the aspects of Medicine Hat. And I've always loved doors. I'm very attracted to doors for some reason, doors of people's homes. I find them so interesting, and I think they're always imbued with the personality of who lives there. So, the Hive Artist Gallery exhibition was when I talked about when I planted my flowers, so that was that one. And then I did a couple exhibitions at the Cypress Club, and they were, again, a continuation in color of most of my Medicine Hat series. And then my big exhibition was actually not too many years ago in 2020 here at the Esplanade, and I'll be showing some of that work tonight as well. And that was called Walking the Flats. And last year I was in a cultivated group exhibition. Now, besides painting family homes and businesses and things in Medicine Hat and neighborhoods, I'm doing some landscapes. So that was kind of my first big landscape exhibition that I was in. So I had high hopes for that actually, and I painted all these really big paintings, like they're 4x6 and 4x8, thinking Medicine Hat's ready for this. We're like New York. We all want a big painting in our dining room and living room. Yeah, no, that didn't work out so good. But I really like painting big. So one day, we'll be all like New Yorkers. So through painting, I can bring my vision of the prairies to life and commit them to canvas in my unique style. So often when you're an artist, you don't think you have a unique style. You think you're just painting like everybody else. But I have been told my stuff is a little bit different than most other people. And the reason why is when I paint in terms of process, I layer my color with glazes and veils, it's called. So on a painting like that one over there, for instance, you can see the sidewalk in the front, how many different colors there are in that painting. And that would all be with different types of glazes. So maybe I'll have a magenta glaze and then I'll put an ultramarine glaze on top, or vice versa. And maybe sometimes I'll add like a warm white or a warm pink in a glaze, and you can still see the colors underneath, yet it just will camouflage a little bit of that layer. So that's kind of a little bit about my painting process. My earlier work had a lot of black in it, and I'm moving away from some of the black because I think it's just a natural thing as an artist that you always want to grow. You don't want to be in the same spot as you were. Last year, we went to the National Gallery in Ottawa, and I was really struck. I think out of all the paintings that I saw this painting, and it's Lauren Harris, and it's called Winter Afternoon. And it was in a special National Gallery exhibit that they had from the Group of Seven. And I'd never actually seen any of the Group of Seven work before, thinking that when you look, or you get some of those older books, or you look online, the colors just don't do the paintings justice. And this one in particular was amazing, because to think that this one is super colorful, and to think that that ultramarine blue and some of the cobalts and the warm whites, they just glow in the painting. And this painting is actually quite large. So when Bruce had mentioned to me about memory paintings, that was actually one of the first paintings that I had thought about that really struck me that would have been a memory painting too. And now that's hanging in the National Gallery. Of course, Lauren Harris was pretty famous, so... But it's, it brings that sense of home, like kind of that sense and that feeling of home and friendliness, I think. And the colors are stunning in it when you see it in person. So. Memory painting. So I had to do a little bit of research on memory painting. Psychologists say that we continually recreate our memories. I just happen to do this through my painting. So some of the work that I've done in the past, and there's still many pieces I still want to do, because they are significant memories for me. And one would be going down to Lions Park. There's lots of, I don't know if you grew up here. If you did, you probably remember going down there on a Saturday or Sunday and playing horseshoes. And people used to just go down there and spend all afternoon at the park, which I just loved. And I was young, but we would have relatives come down from Calgary and Lethbridge. And, for us back then, being a large family, for my uncle to buy Kentucky Fried Chicken for all of us, that was amazing. So that was the only time we got Kentucky Fried Chicken. But with the memory painting and those special memories, there's always places in Medicine Hat that I think about when I was growing up here. And it's not necessarily always when I was young. And thinking, I really do want to capture some of those moments, because if I remember them, other people remember them as well. So, and it's not that I'm always doing things super accurately, like Bruce had alluded to, memory painters, how when they paint, they're doing things like accurately. Mine are a little bit of an enhancement of, like, I'm filling in the gaps in my own memory, I think, when I'm painting some of the scenes and street scenes and parks and things, and adding that to the painting when I'm creating it. So I guess I always want to complete the story, and other people complete their own stories when they look at my artwork. So, for instance, that one again was part of the Walking the Flats exhibition. And the reason, like, to any normal person, that's just a boring street scene. But for me, that particular street and that store was super important, because that was the grocery store that was in our neighborhood. There was another store on Elm Street, which was called Elm Street Market. I have searched high and low for a photo of that place to paint. I can very vaguely remember what it looked like. One day I'm going to give it a shot and try and paint that as well. But Deluxe Grocery was the big store in our neighborhood. We went there for everything, like, I mean everything, because we didn't have a car and we had to walk to downtown and we had to carry our groceries home. So, people that live in really big cities that have all of those amenities that are close by, they think, well, that's no big deal. But in a place where in Medicine Hat, where we don't have the same level of transportation, you're doing a lot of walking and a lot of hauling of stuff home. So it was a very important store to have in our neighborhood. We even had, the story that I used on the walking tour was, at Christmas time, all the little stores like that would have their Christmas lots. Instead of going up to the mall and purchasing your Christmas tree, we would go to the Deluxe Grocery. And I remember going there every Christmas with my brother and picking out a tree. We were only given so much money, so we had to find a tree within the budget. And of course, I always wanted the bigger tree and had to fight with my brother over it. But we would load up our tree from there. They would have it wrapped and he would tie it over his shoulder, and we would walk home our 4 blocks to our house and set up our tree. So when you look at things like that, yes, it doesn't imbue with all of those stories, but I usually try and connect my paintings with some sort of story like that, because they all have special meanings. I'm very passionate about neighborhoods. I'm very passionate about supporting local stores and local businesses. So, if I can feature one of them in one of my paintings, I'm more than happy to do that. And I usually do it for selfish reasons, so because it means something more to me. But as the paintings progress towards the end, there's sort of a rightness about the work, or a sense of satisfaction or completion. And I think, yeah, I've completed that story. Now I can go on to the next. It's kind of a repeat of some of the stuff. See, I'm not even following my own notes. This is I did a series of black and white images of Medicine Hat, probably with 12. And this blue whale, I think I could have sold that 20 times over. Actually, I've got a commission to paint it in color this summer. But I've painted it in all sorts of formats. And if you grew up in Medicine Hat, you definitely know the blue whale up in the park on the hill. And I called it Blue Whale for the slide, but it's actually called We All Remember the Ride. So I know it's been painted a little bit differently right now, but this is the way it originally was, like 10 years ago when I went around town photographing. So so that's just black gesso on white gesso with acrylic paint for the blue. This is the House of Music. I've painted this several times for people too, in different sizes. When I painted it, I actually didn't know that one of my really good girlfriends, that her relative owned the store. So I ended up painting a larger version for her, kind of a little bit different of an angle, but I called it House of Music Levinson's, And when I painted it, shortly after that, they closed down. So, and I didn't know that when I was painting it, but I kind of run around town every summer and I take photos of some buildings, I think, or some businesses that, oh, they've been around for a long, long time. I better get a photo of that, right? Because when I actually want to paint something or have a story that I want to put into a painting, I can never find a photo of what I want to paint. So I end up taking a lot of my own photos. When I originally started, I went down to the archives and got a lot of photos to paint some of the historical stuff. But anyways, I really love painting that. And then after they closed down, it was my girlfriend's uncle that owned that store. But my story of going in there all the time is that we were from a family of 8 kids. I always admired people who could take music lessons. And we would go to the church, Christ the King Church on the Flats, and they would have all of these like younger people playing the piano, to give the main lady a break from the choir. And I always thought, man, I always wanted to learn how to play the piano and never did. My mom actually sent me for lessons at one point in my life. But when you don't have a piano at home, it's kind of hard to practice. And practice is just the component that you need for everything, including painting. So it was that was kind of my story around why I wanted to paint Levinson's, because I used to go in there and look at all the books. And I remember that musty smell that was in the store. So he had some water damage at one point. But, he was a thriving music establishment for many medicine hatters. So it's kind of my homage to them. Malcolm will know this one. I still have your image of the shed. The shed. One day I'll have to maybe get to that one too. I still have that one. So, most of you will know this is the Mackenzie Charland. I called it Mackenzie Charland on Dominion. And when I grew up, we only grew up half a block from this house on Dominion Street. And when we weren't running in the field or swimming or playing kickball or hide and go seek or whatever on the street, we'd be in the neighborhood, walking the streets and just hanging out, because that's kind of what you did back then. There was no TV to watch. If I wanted, I could have listened to Jim Croce record on our turntable, but after I knew all the words to that, you have to get outside and go do something. So I really remember this house vividly because it had that unique front window panes and how they stuck out. And I didn't know until I was older that was actually one of the first stores on the Flats area. So one bright winter day, because we had to walk to school, to St. Louis School from way down in the 1200 block, this house was on our route to go to school. So on a winter day, there was tons of snow. It was in December. So what would you think of? Christmas, Santa Claus. So we heard the front door slam, and somebody marched out the front door, and there was a big Chrysler car that was in the front of the house. And to our surprise, Santa Claus was dressed up, and he had his bag over his shoulder. So I thought for years and years and years after that, Santa Claus lived at that house. So it was quite remarkable, or a little bit of a shock, to find out that Santa did not live at the house. He actually was working at Woolworths. So that's my memory of that house. Couple other things that go on with my exhibit for the Walking the Flats. So that was an interesting project because I had applied to the Esplanade several times for an exhibition. And everybody said to me, well, getting an exhibition at the Esplanade, that's got to be easy. I'm going, well, I don't know how to get an exhibition at the Esplanade. So I tried a few different approaches. And my last approach is I painted a 10 by 12 little painting of the chocolate shop on Aberdeen Street. And I had it so that I had a cradle board that went inside of the painting, and then inside of that, so it made a little box container. And then inside of that, I had my application for a show. And the idea for the show did not change from my application. It was to paint the historic river flats in Medicine Hat. But it was interesting with things with COVID and the way things transpired for the exhibition. I got accepted for the exhibition in the fall, and I thought, great, never heard anything back from the Esplanade after that. Whoa, you know what? I just was working away. I planned everything to scale from the wall. I had all the wall sizes. I planned everything to scale. I had it all laid out on the computer. I had already photographed all my images in the fall. And I was just working away. I had 6 months to get it done. And you'd think 6 months is a lot of time, but it's not. I had planned originally 52 paintings, and I completed 38. So, and the one really large painting that I was painting in the gallery, I didn't have a chance to complete that because the Esplanade moved up the date of the show because of COVID. They had a whole bunch of cancellations, and they said, well, now instead of you having only part of the gallery, you can have the whole gallery. And I'm thinking, oh my Lord. So they were great to work with, and we were pretty creative in terms of using up the space, and we got to really stretch things out. So in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't create more than 38 pieces, because I probably wouldn't have had enough stuff to fill the actual gallery the way it should have been done. So, but the Walking the Flats exhibition for me was a very interesting experience in terms of painting and kind of bringing this idea of these memory paintings to life. I had a couple other ideas that I had wanted to paint too in Medicine Hat, but this is the one that kind of flushed out the best, and something I think personally that I really needed to do. Being a Medicine Hatter and being so tied to all of the people that we knew down on the river flats. And sometimes I think that area of town kind of gets a bad rap. And I know why, but it was a great experience growing up there as a child. And we had such wonderful neighbors and wonderful friends growing up there. So I will never have anything bad to say about living down there. So the first painting, I have a clicker here. Let's see if it works. This one here, that one is called Mrs. Rogers' house. And that was a house actually right across the street from us when we grew up. And it's just a plain old, nothing fancy, 1960 tiny home. She still lives there, actually. And she was a wonderful friend to my mom. So that's why I wanted to kind of honor her with that. This is off of Bridge Street. So if you drive down there from Elm Street School, you will actually see this back alley with that house kind of pushed back. It's kind of an odd, now when I look at it, it's kind of an odd place to build a house, I guess, because it's not really on a street. It's almost like the street is in front, and then the house is behind where the garage should be, and then the alley's right next to it. So, but you know what? That classic frame of that house is my house is no longer there on Dominion Street, but that classic frame was similar to the same architectural style of what I grew up in. So I think anytime I see a building like that in Medicine Hat or a house like that, especially if it's got lilacs around it, I've got to paint that. So, and then the last one was this one here. It does say Ross Street on it. And that was a series of one of the walks that I had painted for the Esplanade. And Ross Street, that sign always reminded me to turn, because when I was little, when I had to walk to school, that you hit the sign, that's what my mom told me, and you turn left, and then you go up that street all the way to Allowance. So, I mean, they're silly little things, but you know what? They're things that kind of have stuck in my mind from growing up as a child. We were very independent being on the flats, like really independent. And now that I have kids that are older in the 20s, I think, how did I even survive? You know, it was, I remember, so just as an example, kindergarten now, you take your kid, you drop them off at the front door, you make sure they get in, you're there to pick them up, right? Well, there was no kindergarten. I went to the first kindergarten class that was at the YMCA. But to get there, because my mom had to work, I was 4 years old, because I was an October baby, so I probably should have been held back a year, I'm thinking, but I wasn't. And she took me the one day before kindergarten started, and we took the bus downtown, and at that time, all the buses lined up on 6th Avenue where the Cypress Club is. And he parked on the corner. Frank Bosch, he was a bus driver, and he parked on the corner. And then I had to get off the bus, get a transfer, get off the bus, walk across the street over to the other side to get on the right bus to go to the YMCA. And I was 4. Would I have let my kids do that? Absolutely not. I don't think my kids would have come home. So those are, some people would say, oh, that's probably, child abuse or, yes?
That house, yes,
This one here?
in the laneway,
Oh, this one here.
that's possibly a boxcar house.
Oh, I never heard of that.
I did a series before that down in the Flats area of a number of possible boxcar houses, but 2 or 3 that are genuinely old boxcar houses.
Oh, so what does boxcar mean exactly?
That means that people bought a boxcar used for CPR, had it hauled to their place by a team of horses,
Mm-hmm.
and they lived in it. That
Wow.
is, and there still is remnants of some of those. And there's one which I was in the interior of a few years ago and did photographs, and then got family photographs of how it was when it was lived in, just as it turns out to be a caboose rather than a box.
Oh, interesting.
But we can talk later about maybe talking about these.
Yes, that would be I would find that very interesting.
For sure, boxcars, if you are at Elm Street School and go to the northwest corner, there are 2 houses on the same property, and they are both boxcar houses for sure,
Yeah.
extensively modified. But I have a friend who went to Elm Street School and still remembers the CPR rating on the side.
Oh, really? Oh, well, that would make sense because this house here would be right behind that street.
And
Yeah.
he pointed that house and said, I think that's a boxcar house.
Oh, so did most of these boxcar houses have this peak on them, or was that something they would have added on
Well,
later on?
What happened typically is that the boxcar is set sideways near the front yard with an entranceway in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side, in the lean-to the kitchen and cooking facilities and bathroom as an add-on on a sloping roof.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, we need to chat. I'd love to see your photos. So I'm not sure, I just thought I would go over the concept of the exhibition that I did because most people were taken aback because it was kind of what's called a concept show, which means I had planned everything based on 5 different walks, all ranging around the river flats coming to downtown. So this one here is just part of the map. So this was all printed on the wall in the Esplanade, like huge on the wall, and it outlined all the walks. So each walk, I stayed true to the street. So if I was on Balmoral Street, I would have painted like the school, I would have painted the house where I grew up, I would have painted Rotary Park, and then I would have turned onto North Railway, and then I painted certain things on North Railway Street. So I was pretty true to every walk that I had picked out. I had one for Strathcona. I had one down to Bridge Street. And I can't remember the other 2 that I had, but I was pretty true to the geographical location of everything that I painted. And everything that I picked had a special meaning or memory for me. Yeah.
The Barbie doll houses were called, I believe, the Ten Commandments.
Yes, they are. Yes. Yes, they were called the Ten Commandments. So, and I remember growing up as a child, everybody said, oh, those are the Ten Commandments houses, right? And it didn't really strike me until I was painting for the show. I had to find out what the Ten Commandments houses were. But you see lots of these around the Western prairies, right? All in a row. So I believe they were ordered out of a catalog and then shipped and built in place is what my understanding was, which is fascinating. You think about online shopping now. Well, they had online shopping. It was just called a catalog and you just ordered it by hand and it came on the train. So it was pretty inventive. So this one here is near and dear to my heart. That is my house where I grew up on Balmoral Street. And this was our neighbors. And they were really great neighbors. When we moved there when I was in grade 2, I always joke about when I did this walk series here, that when I had to walk from Dominion Street to St. Louis School, that was about 8 blocks. But I thought I hit the money load because when we moved here, I only had a half a block to go to St. Louis School. So I could go home for lunch, actually. It was great. But the Cotes lived here. Donna Cote and Morris Cote lived beside us, and they had a family of 5 kids. So, of course, with all of our kids and all of their kids, we got along great. Lots playing on the streets. It was a great street to grow up on. And so this actually is just right across the street from them. And I like to say, I called this one Barbie doll houses across the street because it's kind of named after my sister Barb. And the ready-made row housing, they always said that there was 10 in a row. So I'm not sure if on the street there would have been all the way to the end of the street or not. But I painted them at Easter time. So I think I was pretty inspired by Easter egg colors. So they're probably all, they're pretty well all white. But I mean, you know, sometimes white is boring, right? So. And then the last one on this list is Mackenzie Drugs. And I have very fond memories of Miles from Mackenzie Drugs. He was a great guy and he always looked after us when we went in there. And I know that they had purchased Mackenzie Drugs from the previous owner who had actually started the pharmacy and the business. So, you know what, I just always appreciated their hometown, their friendly service. When I went away from school, they always chatted with me when I went in, because if I had to get prescriptions and stuff, like you couldn't transfer prescriptions back then. I had to take them back to school with me. So they were one of the businesses that I always made sure I stopped at and said hi. Triple E. So I painted that years ago and had that, that was in the exhibition as well. And now they've closed down. So I was glad I painted it. And that's with so many of the buildings that I have painted. I'm glad I take the time to photograph them and take the time to paint them, because before you know it, it's changed and, you know, torn down and something else put there. So I'm not going to say I'm nostalgic, but I do like to kind of capture that moment and that memory of the place. So I only know of Triple E because it had the 3 antique stores that were all in a row. And of course, being, you know, an artist in that mind, I love looking at all that shiny stuff. So I would often stop there as a kid, and I used to chuckle when I used to leave the store, because the lady behind the desk, she would watch me like a hawk. Like, I don't know if any of you knew her, but like, what am I going to steal? I got little shorts on and a little t-shirt. Like, I'm not going to steal anything, but you know, I just like to go in and look at all the copper and the brass and all the antique, like she used to have all the antique bedroom sets, and I don't know, it was something to do, right? Something to waste a little bit of time. But I always, like I said, every time I think of that store, I just chuckle about the lady that worked there, because I'm sure she thought I was going to walk away with something. Got to go back. This one here was on Dominion Street on the 1200 block, and I called it Time for Tomatoes because Mrs. Iannatone lived in that house, and I'm not sure if any of you know Gino, but that's where he grew up. And I spent a lot of time there because you'll see as I'm talking that everything involves food. If you're hungry, she always had pasta sauce on the stove. I loved going in, and she had her old 40s table, little tiny metal table with that thick plastic on top of it. She had the thick plastic on all their couches and all their chairs. And I just, Alta glass, and she had Medelta pottery, and just all that stuff, right? So medicine hat, I always thought, going to her house. But the most important thing is she had a huge garden. Everybody on the flats had big gardens to feed big families, and there was a never-ending food supply at her house. So if my mom wasn't home and I was hungry, I went to Mrs. Anatone's house. Very proud of her tomato patch. And I think you'll recognize the gate here. I've painted Lions Park twice. I've painted the other sign on the other side, and this one I painted for the exhibition. And again, like I mentioned before, my fond memories of just being down there in Lions Park. So there was, across the street from Lions Park, there was that ice rink, which I'm still looking for a picture of that. Like now they just have that big circle there. I would love to find a picture. So if any of you have a picture of that ice rink from like the 70s, I'd love to get my hands on it. So another place in the winter where we spent a lot of time, because as flats rats, that's what I called us, we would go there and we would skate in the winter. And actually, skating was kind of a little bit of a exaggeration. I was young. I went with my brother because he was supposed to babysit me, and I spent most of the time in that heating shack. And then when they'd play in the chimney, and then they'd come off the ice, then I had like so many minutes to like do my laps, right? And then I'd have to get off really quick before the puck started flying again. So anyways, that's my big memory of that area. But it's on my list. I've photographed it in the summer from a couple of different views, and I probably could make it up. I don't know how accurate I would be. And I still have to get out to Elkwater because they still have like the old fashioned rink. And maybe that will inspire me to put something together for that. So this painting I have here tonight, this is called Don't Forget the Cream Mama, and this is on Allowance Avenue, and the Dumanowskis live there, another large family from the flats. And I love going there because, again, food related. She was a fantastic cook. They're Polish, and that's the first time I ever had pierogies and cream and all that good stuff that they make. And she had a huge long table for all those kids in the kitchen. And I just remember where their kitchen was. They had these trees on the side of the house, and it was so cool in there in the summertime. And you know what? You sat down and there food just magically appeared on the table. So it was another favorite place for me to visit. But very, very kind woman to anybody who walked in the door. Yeah. And this is the Deluxe Grocery, the other one that I have here tonight. Indeed, another favorite. And then this one I called Into the Field. So this is at the very end of Dominion Street. And when we lived there, this street that went this way, there was nothing there. It was just a field. We ran all over that area. We could go to Medelta back then. We could climb on all of those abandoned hills of clay remnants, and pick things up. Like, you could do all that stuff back then. But it was a huge field in the summer, and we used to fly our kites there, and the grass would grow. Nobody cut it. So the grass would grow like about this high, and you could lay in there for hours and watch the clouds. So that was my access into the field. That was my access to the field, the end of the corner. So this is just an overview of the walking tours that we did for the summer as kind of a COVID extension, for education extension from the exhibition. So I just put the brochure in there. And people still, so you can see my edits and stuff. I couldn't find the original one, but it was a really great experience to do that as a follow-up. And I got to meet lots of great people that actually grew up on the flats, and many of them came out for the tours, which I was super pleased to see. So much so that I had a neighbor from Balmoral Street, and she grew up kitty corner to us. And she was up here from Florida, and she came to the walking tour, and I hadn't seen her in probably 30 years. So yeah, it's great to connect with people like that. So now I'm on to neighborhoods. So you can see I do flip around a little bit. I do paint quite a variety of stuff. And people say, well, neighborhoods and memory paintings, they're kind of the same thing, but I don't think they are. I don't classify them. So I really love the old-fashioned neighborhoods. I love going up on the hill too and taking photos up there and painting all those little details that you see in an old neighborhood. They've got such unique and you can tell the pride that people have in their neighborhood just from walking up and down the street. So I guess that kind of goes hand in hand of why I like the front doors with the wreaths, and it really shows personality of the people who live there. So I call it community pride. A few more. These are kind of street, or these are kind of a little bit all over town. This one here was from Bridge Street. So I had a story about walking to Medelta with that painting. And I just really like that view. One night I was down walking around taking photos at the Golden Hour and saw this little car with all that light, and it just really inspired me. So typical Medicine Hat. This one here is just, I do paint a lot of back alleys. This one is down by Kingsway. Yeah, I can't really remember the story that I have for that, but I like the telephone poles, I like the light, and I really like the trees. And obviously I like lilacs, so this is up on Gershaw, I think it's Gershaw Road, up on the hill. This house, the reason actually I photographed it originally wasn't for the lilacs. I photographed it because this house shape kind of goes like this, and it comes down, so it's not like a triangle, you know? And what it reminded me of was growing up and for the first time having TV and watching Amityville Horror, because the house structure, the architecture is the same as the one in the movie. See? Abstract minds, right? I don't know. You never know where the connections are going to fly. So, but when I went back looking through my photos and cropped it, the lilacs are something I really paint and photograph a lot now. So I'm painting lilacs right now. It's early. Few more other places from, these are stores. Oh, there's Bruce's painting in the middle. Alton's Grocery was near and dear to my heart. I painted that actually for a Cypress Club exhibition. And I loved going in that store because it was one of the only grocery stores on the way home from when we walked from downtown, other than IGA. And my mom used to complain that the store was so expensive, but I remember the owner as being such a kind guy with a friendly smile. And the other thing that struck me is that store is all the Hutterites shop there. Like they went there and they bought all of their case lots from Mr. Alton. And it kind of reminded me of like some of the movies from Little House on the Prairies. I don't know why I connected that with him and the Hutterites. And I just liked going in there because he had the whole, you know, in Little House on the Prairies where the old stores had like the hardware and they were kind of like an all-purpose store. But they had such beautiful displays of all the cans like stacked up in their stores to display their products and all their goods. Well, his store, that's what I remember about his store. He took so much time to stack all of that stuff up. And later on, I found when I talked to his daughter that they had to go in there and do that. And if somebody bumped that off, they had to go back to the store and get all that organized for him. He was very particular that way. So, but it was, that's my Alton story. And Chantel's esthetician, that's the one that's the view that Bruce was talking about. I was always pretty fascinated by Chantel. She grew up on the flats too, right by St. Louis School. We went to school with her kids. I never really was at their house or knew them because they had a French accent. So, you know, when we went to school, they were different, right? So, and you know, and she worked and she ran a business, whereas none of the other moms on the flats worked and none of them had owned and ran a business. So I always thought they were kind of they were a little anomaly by themselves. So But, you know, I ended up going there years later and, you know, doing some treatments and stuff, and I really got to know her. And I was really sad to see that she had closed down her business, because when you think about it, when I talked to my mom later, she was pretty revolutionary at the time to have this French, you know, spa sort of thing open downtown. Like, it was quite exclusive if you went to Chantel's. So it was nice that, you know, she could stay open as long as she could. She only closed her business down, I think it was just right after COVID. And then the other one is Scudder Grocery. This one here. And that's right across from St. Louis School. So I walked by that many, many times, you know, on our way down to Allowance. And I guess what I loved about it, it's very Western Canadian with the lettering on the sides of the buildings. So the groceries and the fruit and vegetables, just very typical of what you would see in the 70s growing up in Medicine Hat. I like those buildings, so. This is just some of the other work that I've done. They're memory paintings. They're not necessarily my memory paintings. They're building portraits or memories of other people. So, like I said before, I do commission work. Mr. Lube was a surprise gift for somebody, that one there. And then this is the Dietrich House on First Street that I painted. And this is a house, a historic home on the Hill area by 5th Street. And she actually didn't want a view of the front of the house. I really loved her front door. It was red, my favorite color. But she ended up doing something from the back view. So it was a gift to herself. So. Keys. Did you look at the paintings and notice that there's keys in the paintings? Yeah, so everyone asked me about my keys. So when I first started, I tried painting at home. Well, with kids at home and husband at home and everything, that's a complete disaster. Nobody leaves you alone. So I figured after the second year, I got to get out of the house. So I went to Evelyn Kleiss, and I'm sure a lot of you know who she is. She's a great artist in town. And I said to her, do you know any space that I could rent, like just a room so that I can paint and study and do all those sorts of things? She says, oh, well, we have our studio on Bridge Street, and we rent rooms out. So I thought, great. So I hauled all my stuff down there, rented that room. And I was there for about 2.5 years, 3 years almost, 2.5 years. And I was there about 6 months, and they had to do a whole bunch of commercial upgrades to that building because it used to be St. Paul's Lutheran Church. So they still had to keep up a lot of the fire stuff and all the lights and exit signs and all that. And at the same time, they were replacing a lot of the locks in the church. So they had this huge pile that had to go to the dump, and it was in the back alley, and they had arranged for somebody to pick this stuff up. And she says, well, go back there and see if there's anything that you would like. So I trottled on back there, and I found a box of keys because they were changing all the locks. So I thought, well, I just finished painting all the doors of downtown. Something clicked. I thought, I'm going to use these. Instead of painting the doors, I'm just going to put the keys in the paintings. So that's how the key all came about. I still put the keys in paintings. Sometimes I leave them exposed. Sometimes I put paint on top of them, so they're kind of collaged in the painting. And when I do a commission for a business or a family, often they have their own key they want to put in the painting. I've only ever done one painting that has 2 keys in it, and that's because it was an old house up on 7th Street in Crescent Heights, and they renovated. So they still lived in the original part, and when they added on, they had another key. So I put 2 keys in that painting. So it's a little bit of a trademark for me now, but I think something that people love. I can tell you stories about how people hunt down keys, like keys to the house, keys to their parents' home. It really takes on a meaning of its own to have something from that physical house placed in it. It's a deep connection for people. So just a couple of things, other things that I do besides painting. Like I mentioned, that I teach, I do workshops, and currently right now I'm doing a mini masterpiece series here for the Esplanade. I did 2 classes in May, and I'm doing 2 in June. And if you're interested and you want to do a little 8x8 painting, it's a real fun night. They have a bar set up, and we have about an hour and 45 minutes to do a painting, and I guide you through the painting step by step. It's a real fun night. So, and I've never done that before. It's fun. I've done my own classes, and I teach exactly the same way in my own classes. So it's a really fun to do it, and we do it in this very room. So it's a great experience. If you have any questions, or I have a new website, so I don't have a lot of my paintings that I showed you here tonight on my website. They were on my old website, but I had to shut that down, and I'm basically starting over, but they eventually will be on my new website again. But if you have any questions or anything, or queries, or you have photos that you want to share with me, please reach out. There's my email, and I'll leave some cards on the table when I'm finished. And yeah, that's it.
Do you always paint from a picture, or do you just paint from an image?
I take my own photo. Mostly of my photos that I've painted from are ones I've taken and edited and cropped and looked at them for composition and all those sorts of things. Yes, long and short of it is I do paint from a photo. So I'm trying to paint and teach myself to paint from a TV screen, but because it's architectural stuff, most of the paintings that I do, and I use a ruler, a cork ruler, and I run my brush along the ruler, and then if I had to go and put it up to the TV to measure an angle on something, I'd get my TV all dirty. So that's why I still use photos to paint from. But I try and use my iPad a little bit. I'm trying to be a little bit more, technical, I guess, because most of my artist friends, they all paint from TVs, but it's different when you're painting a landscape from a TV than when you're painting buildings, right? I have to measure with my ruler all the time when I'm painting, so yes.
Question.
Yes?
Do you do limited edition prints by any chance?
I haven't done that. It's something that's kind of on my list to do. And if I do it, I have sold prints, but they're not like limited edition prints. Like for instance, when I paint one of the schools, like Connaught School, then usually if someone retires, they'll buy a print for somebody, or the Cypress Club doors, they buy a print for like the outgoing president every year. But it's on my list. I think the best way to do a print run would be to have 4 paintings that I don't sell, and they'll just be limited edition prints. And I think I am going to do that. I just haven't figured out what I'm going to paint yet. So anybody have any ideas, let me know. Yes?
Well, I noticed that you have a special gift for light, and I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about that. It seems like that is a real prairie thing that we all feel is a sense of light.
Yeah.
It really just keeps coming at me on your paintings.
That's funny. You're the third person who has said that to me recently. And I never really thought of my work that way. But I guess growing up in Medicine Hat, it's so hot. And we have so much sunlight here. I think everybody else has that clarity of vision too. And they don't. We actually don't have any atmosphere here. When you go back into the art history books and you look at Monet and a lot of those old paintings from like the 1800s, they have like that atmosphere. They have that, which I now realize it's that haze. We don't have a haze like that. Everything is crystal clear here. Like lots of days you can see across to Crescent Heights from like Maple Avenue Bridge, and it's crystal clear. Most places people live, that's not like that. There is that bluish atmosphere that kind of goes over the distant hills and the things in the distance. So when I first started painting, everything was kind of 2D because I didn't see that atmosphere. I've only clued into that in the last couple years, which is kind of odd, but I said Medicine Hat is not like that. And during COVID, I had my buddy Doug Swinton from Calgary come down, and he says, well, no wonder your paintings look like that. He says, you don't have any atmosphere here. So it's that bright light. But I think now, like the last couple years, especially last year, I'm very cognizant. These are older works, but I think I still focused on that intuitively. It wasn't purposeful, I guess. It's just the way I see the prairies. Yeah.
You mentioned the golden hour, and I think we're all aware of that, just before sunset, and everything just lights up.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I do photograph a lot at the golden hour. Interesting thing is when you're a painter and you're learning, I just photographed it any time of the day before, but that's not what you're supposed to do. So I have great photographs of Medicine Hat, but they're that afternoon light where there's no shadows. That's a no-no in painting. But I still have used a lot of those photographs because I'm never going to get out and get the same photo of what I've shot before. So I'm getting better in terms of technological to be able to do some of that on my iPad and plan that out a little bit better. But I find actually the best paintings of mine is when I don't plan, when I just paint. Because I really like to paint with value, and value is the lightness or the darkness of something. And when you're painting the light, you're painting light and you're painting shade, the shadow, right? So I think I intuitively done that. It's only now that some of the pieces of the technical terms of the painting are coming to fruition. I'm thinking, oh yeah, okay, now I recognize that, or I can put a name to it. But when I first started, I didn't know I was doing that. Mm-hmm.
You're interpreting them through that lens of memory.
Yes.
And that's what I pick up on, and I suspect a lot of other people are as well. Because there's a little haziness to it. Mm-hmm. Not the haziness of atmosphere.
No, there's no atmosphere.
Memory.
Yes.
You know, memories are not always crystal clear.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
Emotional context, as you've outlined, comes in, remembering the people,
Yeah.
remembering the incidents, remembering the smells.
Well, and I think it's that feeling, right? I try and put myself in that feeling when I was there, and I think that comes through in the work. Somebody recently said to me, she says, oh, well, you put, like cooking, you put all your love in the painting. And I said, yeah, I guess I do. Yeah. So that's it, unless anybody else has any other questions.
Any more questions?
Any questions about painting itself?
No, but I'll bring you some photos of this St. Theresa.
Oh, yes, I would love to paint that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a couple of places, I'm just going to put it out there. So Elm Street or Elm Street Market. If anybody has any photos of that, I would love to get my hands on those. And you know, if you guys have any ideas for other buildings that are no longer there that you think would look great in a painting, please reach out to me because I'm always looking for stuff. And you know, I don't always get around. But Elm Street Market, I was really on a hunt for a whole year. I tracked down all of the, was it Hellman, I think was the last name? Heller. I tracked down every Heller in the phone book and I ended up with nothing, so. Anyways, but yeah, thank you very much for your time. I certainly appreciate being here today.